I recently saw the movie The Life of Pi. Now, for anybody who's watching this who hasn't seen the movie, I want to give you a warning that this video may have some spoilers in it, so if you don't want to know anything about the movie, this would be a good time to stop this video. I also want to say that I've not read the book, so this is really only based on the movie, and I'll admit that the book could be completely different, so I'm not trying to make any kind of commentary on the book, but only on the movie. This movie is compelling because it's a spiritual quest, I think, and spiritual journeys really do have a way of drawing us in. The problem is I find that it falls flat on its face eventually. But let me kind of walk you through this process. It starts off with exploring the life of this young boy, Pi, in India, and he's born into a Hindu family. And Pi quickly discovers other religions, particularly Christianity and Islam. And he decides he wants to embrace all of these religions. And at one point, his father sits him down at the dinner table and makes a comment. He says, Pi, you can't believe in everything. You can't be each one of these religions. If you believe in everything, you believe in nothing. And I think that was a very potent point in the movie. And unfortunately, it just got dropped from the whole movie altogether. I think that's the point that needed to be explored because it really could have helped to make this movie have some spiritual depth to it. Instead, what happens is Pi ends up on a boat as his family is moving to Canada with all these zoo animals from his family's zoo. And the boat shipwrecks. And Pi finds himself on a lifeboat, ultimately left alone on this lifeboat with a tiger. And this story continues and it starts to talk about his spiritual quest and how he has to surrender everything to God, but also how he's forced to, learn who he is. And it becomes a story of man versus nature in many ways, but also talks about the spiritual journey that Pi goes through and contrasts it to the fact that this tiger has no spiritual journey. But throughout the movie, constantly, Pi is embracing all religions again. He's not choosing one religion. Why is this problematic? Well, it's problematic because it insults every religion. And I don't think that was the intention of the movie. I think actually the movie producers probably wanted to do this as a way of uplifting every religion. But in the process, they ended up insulting every religion by making every religion appear to be equal to every other religion. And see, this becomes problematic right away because anybody who's devout to any religion knows that their religion is somehow unique and different from every other religion, and that it makes truth claims that are contradictory to truth claims of other religions. So as a Christian, I certainly believe that Jesus Christ is the only means of salvation. I believe him to be the way, the truth, and the life, and I believe that nobody comes to the Father except through him, partially because that's what he told us. But what this means is that it also means that I believe that you can't come to the Father through Islam or through Hindu. Now, as Catholics, what our Catholic Church does teach is that the Catholic faith has the fullness of truth to it. The fullness of truth, we say, subsists in the Catholic Church, but that there are elements of truth in other religions. So what we don't say is that other religions are therefore 100% wrong and evil. We say there's elements of truth, and to the extent that we see those truths, we point to those things as saying, oh, those are good things. So when Hinduism encourages people to meditate and contemplate their lives, we Christians can say, yeah, that's a good thing, contemplate your life. Or if Islam calls somebody to do something that's morally good, we say, yes, behave in that way, don't steal. Those are things that we can say are elements of truth that we find in other religions. But ultimately, the fullness of truth, the way to salvation, we say is only found in the Catholic faith. Now, this is going to be a problem for people of the Islamic faith and for Hindus and for people of the Jewish faith and every other faith. I understand that. The problem is they're also going to make those same claims that, no, you have to be part of our faith tradition to have the fullness of truth, or you have to be part of this faith tradition to have the fullness of truth. And I understand that. So then what needs to happen is we need to sit down and have good arguments. We need to sit down and make an argument for our faith and say, why is it we believe what we believe? And why is it that we believe our faith has a better truth claim than these other faiths? What we can't do is we can't say that, well, we believe that our faith is just the same as all these other faiths. So if you want to be a Muslim or if you want to be a Hindu, that's fine. They're all valid ways to salvation. See, that's an insult to the Christian faith. Same thing an Islamic person who would come out and say, well, yeah, but I believe Christianity is an equally valid way to salvation, or I believe that the Jewish faith is an equally valid way of salvation. You'd never hear that because it's not true. They each believe their own faith is the only way to salvation. And that becomes important for each faith, because if you don't do that, then what you're saying is that well, we don't really believe in anything because we believe that everything is true. See, if you believe that everything is true, you believe there really is no one truth, that there's a multiplicity of truths, that your religion is just one amongst many. But see, in Christianity, we certainly don't claim that. We say that Christ is not one amongst many. He's a unique person in the history of salvation. And we say that it's through Christ, who is God incarnate, that salvation was brought to humanity. And through no other source is salvation possible. That's a different claim that we're making than to say, well, all religions are equal, and so we all might as well just hold hands and sing Kumbaya or something like that. We're making some unique claims in Christianity. That's what's left out of the movie The Life of Pi. There's no real exploration of truth. See, what would have been great is had Pi then, after hearing those words of his father, gone into a spiritual journey that allowed him to say, which of these truth claims makes the most sense? Which one do I find to be the way to salvation? Instead, he says, well, all these faiths gives us a way to salvation, and that there's a God who's transcendent, and he asks us to, live our life in a certain way, and he tests us in certain ways. Well, okay, that's fine, and that's true, but it's so generic that it almost means nothing. When we say, well, what does that mean? That's where these faiths actually come into play, and that's why these faiths can't all be treated as if they're all the same. That's why the coexist movement makes no sense, is because it's saying that we should accept all these faiths which have contradictory claims and accept them all as valid. Well, that makes no sense. Rather, what should have been done in this movie, I think, is to explore that line that the father put forward and say, not all of these can be true. So where is it that I find truth, and why is it that I find truth in this particular faith? So that would have been a great spiritual movie, and that's where I think that this movie fell short a little bit. But it is an entertaining movie, certainly, and it does point to the fact that we all do have our spiritual journey that we're on, and we struggle with different claims that are made by different religions. But ultimately, the answer to that claim can't be that we accept and embrace everything. Rather, it's got to be we explore and say, which one of these claims do we believe to be the fullness of truth?